But Robert, speaking of, tracking everyone's last movement and then sending them to jail for 5 years. What was the January 6th? There were two cases that came out this week. Who
Yep.
got sentenced to 10 years?
Yeah,
10 years.
An ex-cop defending others against Capitol Police who were attacking protesters. For basically self-defense, but it's in the District of Columbia. So the judge was hostile. The jury pool was hostile. Grand jury's hostile. Prosecutors hostile. You can't get any semblance or sense of justice whatsoever. And you got a sentence that's 2.5 times longer than the average rapist gets in America. 10 years in federal prison for an ex-police officer coming to the aid of someone else and pushing against another Capitol Police officer who was attacking and assaulting a protester. So it's just one example of the inanity of this. But for those that don't know, almost impossible to appeal. The federal sentencing processes and here's a problem brought about largely by conservatives, which is crazy sentencing ranges, right? They have federal sentencing ranges that basically, I favor discretion in judges and juries over sentencing commissions, but I would prefer juries first. But the way it should start is that it should be capped from the beginning, right? When you have these open-ended federal criminal charges where it's like, between 0 and 40 years, it's like, what is that? You're just giving a judge an excuse to issue crazy, politically prejudiced, disparate sentences. That they should look at the actual crime and come up with a realistic sentence, and that should be the cap. No more giving them lots of range and discretion. And that cap should be limited. We have evidence that outside of people who are ongoing imminent risk to safety and security, which is really a rare group of sociopaths, psychopaths, people who cannot constrain their criminality. Most people by the age of 35 to 40 quit being criminals that have a criminal record before. And it's the certainty of punishment matters far more in deterrence than the severity of punishment. Indeed, the severity of punishment at some point becomes counterproductive. But here it's politically partisan manipulation of the sentencing process because too much discretion was granted by Congress to the federal judiciary in the context of criminal sentencing, such that it's almost impossible to appeal those. Very, very hard, big burden to overcome. You can just highlight the absurdity. The judge just made a United States Supreme Court justice by the Democrats, gave much softer sentences to people and was critical of even any harsh sentence for people who had see child pornography on their computers than a guy who defended a guy who had been a long-serving representative and defender of American interests. This wasn't a career criminal. That's Robert, what to be reserving these criminal sentences for.
It's because
that are imminently dangerous. This guy wasn't a danger to anybody.
No, but she said, Robert, having it on your computer is less grievous than having actual photographs of it and whatever. But I don't want people accusing you
which
or
was
me.
A level of insanity. And what she wouldn't acknowledge was that put it this way, it's invariable that people convicted of child assault are deeply involved in child pornography. That those two are deeply connected. It's not like it's more contentious when people argue adult pornography leading to sexual assault. That evidence is frankly tenuous. It's not tenuous when it comes to child pornography and child abuse. That is a strict 1-to-1 ratio. In the sense that if you commit assault, you'll have it. That doesn't mean everyone who has it commits assault, but it's a strong indicator of a propensity to do so. And it's why we criminalize it. We consider any participation of it at any level to be an imminent risk to the well-being of our community, and I think justifiably so. Yet, those kind of people get a year, 2 years, whatever. Asimov's kid in California got a sweetheart deal by Robert Mueller when he was the federal U.S. attorney there, who had one of the biggest stashes of CP in American history and got to walk clean and didn't serve a day in jail. After which the W. Bush family rewarded him by making him FBI director not long after, boys and girls. But it's a disturbing sentence. Somebody who was just like outside the Capitol with a sign or something got 30 days. It's like, whereas people who illegally attacked the church and the White House when Trump during the BLM riots, those people are getting paychecks from the government. They're writing them checks for even trying to protect the church, for even trying to protect the White House. That's the level of insanity that we are at. And as an example, it leads into a person who got sued for because the plaintiff was libeled for just taking a photo of being anywhere connected to January 6th, which was the sister of the Marine veteran.
Alec, but hold on before we get there, because I don't want anyone saying Viva and Barnes are straw manning the decision. The judge sentenced this guy to 10 years. I heard it, and I was like, okay, there was video evidence. It should be pretty black and white to convict this guy and convict and sentence to 10 years. He claimed self-defense, whether or not it's self-defense, but I mean, let's just see the video. This is, and I hope this is the right video. Let me just get the audio off.
You're standing with a line of D.C. police officers trying to protect the West Terrace of the U.S. Capitol January 6th. 54-year-old Thomas Webster burst through the mob with a profanity-laced tirade.
Oh, my goodness. 10 years, 10 years. Hold on, sorry, I just want to bring it up so that it's full screen.
Webster's attorney now filing court documents claiming a D.C. police officer used excessive force against Webster. It is unclear if Webster's attorney is referring to the officer in the yellow coat who initially pushes the Marine Corps veteran and former New York City police officer before Webster charges. Webster's attorney also telling the court he plans to use the body-worn camera footage to prove excessive force used by the officer happened before Webster's alleged criminal acts. After the initial skirmish, the video shows Webster on top of an officer who is knocked to the ground. In an interview with prosecutors, that officer said as Webster tried to rip off his helmet, he was choked by his own chin strap, leaving the officer unable to breathe. In the District of Columbia, a person cannot claim self-defense to justify an assault on a police officer unless that officer uses more force than reasonably necessary. And the force used in response against the officer must be no more than necessary for a person's protection. Thomas Webster.
So that's the video. Just so everybody, and I won't. I mean, you all know what I think of that. 10 years, maybe not.
That's insane. I mean, it's utterly ludicrous. It's utterly ludicrous. You have someone with no criminal history, who has an extended history of service to protection of the American people, that is at an environment, which, by the way, the Capitol Police was gassing people, attacking people, provoking people, doing a range of things that in every other context during the BLM riots were considered absolutely horrific and tyrannical and oppressive and the rest, again, such that they're writing checks to the people who did worse acts during the BLM riots in the District of Columbia. And here he is mostly responding initially, complaining about what's taking place as a former officer, as an officer who understands that this is not supposed to be the proper procedure for Capitol. But Capitol Police are a joke anyway. There's political hacks, okay? That they're not real police in a traditional sense. And so it's not like they do daily policing of any consequence beyond cover up various crimes that members of Congress commit. I mean, that's all they really do. And so he's saying this is wrong, and it escalates, and he's attacked first at multiple levels, according to him. And he says the body camera footage proves it. But because of the circumstances he's in, he cannot get a fair and impartial trial. Not possible. And then he's sent to 10 years, 10 years in federal prison. I mean, that is ridiculous. I mean, it makes little sense at all in terms of proportionality, in terms of sensibility. The only logic, nobody has any doubt that if this was a BLM person setting fire to a house someplace, they wouldn't get 10 years. And yet somebody who gets into a controversy with a police member about whether they were properly policing, that led to what? For a minute, he thought he couldn't breathe. For a minute, he thought he could. That's it. So, he had his chin strap on in such a way he couldn't figure out whether he could breathe for a minute. Apparently, he wasn't hurt, right? Because where's the detail of that? That would be all over the news for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years. Had it happened, didn't happen. So it's another outrageous verdict by a politically corrupted judicial process that thinks it's sending a message, just like the Red Sermon, to the dissident population to line up and behave, line up and obey. And what the court system doesn't understand is it's the court system that is impeaching itself, indicting itself, incriminating itself for its open political partisan prejudice. More and more people are waking up, particularly the law enforcement, because this was a veteran police officer. More and more law enforcement-oriented groups and constituencies are waking up to just how corrupt the American judiciary is, and some of the worst are federal judges. And you scrape the bottom of the barrel, you'll find the Southern District of New York and the District of Columbia.
Well, it's like it goes full circle back to the beginning of this stream where, the cops are seeing it and they have to worry about defectors within the RCMP tipping off the protesters. But I do want to I want to say one thing. This is not a cover my own ass. This is a cover my own dignity. I brought up a chat that said, if you're going to get 10 years for that, implying you may as well do worse. Here's the thing. No and don't. The reality, though, is when you don't need people to commit the crimes that you want them to commit, to punish them severely, and you do it anyhow, there's a very real risk that you create this, you disincentivize people not to break the law when you destroy their lives in a disproportionate manner for any manner in which they may have broken the law. And we've seen other cases where they just fabricate alleged crimes out of whole cloth. The whole point is you don't give them the fodder to do that, period.
Oh, yeah. Well, you look at King, you look at Gandhi, you look at the mistakes in some parts of people like Nelson Mandela, that when they took the bait in response to the bad actions of the government, usual violence of the government. In Mandela's case, King and Gandhi did not. Mandela did. I mean, basically, you wanted just civil rights in South Africa. And what happened is that, the South African police, one of the most ruthless and criminal organizations that a lot of conservatives, by the way, a lot of people on the right justified and defended South Africa's horrific regime, one of the worst regimes in the history of America, of the world, in the 20th century. You're talking about money laundering, drug laundering, human trafficking, you name it. A bunch of people got together and protested in the 1950s, and they just decided to shoot them all down. Killed about 70 people, killed a bunch of women and little kids. Naturally, that radicalized Mandela. So Mandela aligned with the people that would provide arms and funds. Some of those were communists. Hence, he got identified, got put in the book as a communist. Started doing subversive resistance and revolution, like I hear a lot of people here in the States occasionally say. And what happened? Within a few years, he's arrested in prison, and so is the whole hierarchy of the ANC. And he lost an audience to large parts of the West that he otherwise had. So it was a mistake. He himself has acknowledged that. That he should have stuck with the King Gandhi style. It's very natural to respond to horrific actions of the government with an instinctual response that is exactly what they want. That's what the Red Sermon speech was about. It was, as Jack Posobiec noted, entirely intended to provoke a reaction because they didn't get what they needed out of January 6th. The whole world can see this is an overreaction by the government, not an overreaction by the people and the protesters. And so as long as people maintain that spirit, the same spirit Trump made his speech in this weekend in Philadelphia, then that won't happen. We won't escalate to worse and more dangerous problems, because that's what they want, because they need it. They need something to discredit their opponents. And right now, everything they're doing is failing. They're not getting the provocation, the response that they wanted. They're not getting the reaction they keep inviting. It's like that meme where the guy's like, he's doing the poking the little frog, he's poking him, and he's like, it has like an FBI hat or something. So please do this, please do this. That's what that whole speech was meant to do. I mean, why do you think they use V for Vendetta visual imagery of the president from V for Vendetta? They want you to react like V for Vendetta from the film. They want a violent resistance, not a peaceful resistance, because as long as it remains peaceful, they're in trouble.